Hold on, before you click away, let me make a prediction. You see, in the next 20 years, Nigeria may produce millions of people who no longer identify as Christians. Not because they stopped searching for God, not because they suddenly became evil, but because the God they were introduced to never existed in the first place. And if that sounds offensive, just hold on, just chill. The rest of this conversation might explain why. 20 years from now, Nigeria may produce one of the largest population of former Christians the world has ever seen. Not because people suddenly stopped believing in God, not because atheism became fashionable, not because science defeated faith, but because the version of God many people are being introduced to doesn't exist. And eventually, people get tired of defending what they cannot honestly believe. The question is no longer whether Christianity is growing in Nigeria. The real question is, what kind of Christianity is growing? And what kind of people is it producing? Because growth is not always health. Sometimes cancer grows too. I don't think Nigerians are living God. I think many Nigerians are living a version of God that was sold to them. A God who behaves like a politician, a God who thinks like a tribal chief, a God who negotiates like a businessman, a God who always seems to need money, who is constantly angry, constantly offended, constantly demanding, and somehow always agrees with the opinions of whoever seems to be holding the microphone. When faith becomes manipulation, the soul doesn't rebel, it gets exhausted, and exhausted people eventually walk away, not from God, from the performance. One of the biggest tragedies of modern Christianity is that fear has replaced wisdom. Fear is easier to manage. Fear is easier to monetize. Fear is easier to control. A fearful believer spends his entire life asking, what must I do so that God won't punish me? But a mature believer asks, what must I become to reflect truth? Those are completely different questions. One produces dependency, the other produces growth. One keeps people small, the other makes them responsible. And systems built on control rarely reward responsibility. Let's be honest, many people today have been introduced to a God who sounds more like a corporation than a father, a God obsessed with offerings, a God who suspends blessing until transactions are completed, a God who only speaks to special men, a God who needs constant praise to feel important, a God who can supposedly create galaxies but cannot communicate with his children without a middleman. Think about that. The problem is not that people reject God. The problem is that many people are being asked to worship a caricature, and eventually caricatures collapse. Somewhere along the line, discipleship was replaced by expectation management. Faith became transactional. Pay this, sow that, attend this, buy that, unlock this breakthrough, cancel that course, activate this season. Everything became a formula. God became a vending machine, and spirituality became religious gambling. Put in the right seed, put in the right liver, hope for a miracle. But transformation, real transformation, doesn't work that way. Character doesn't work that way. Truth doesn't work that way. Young Nigerians are not necessarily becoming less spiritual. Many are becoming less willing to ignore contradictions. They hear that God is love, then they watch greed. They hear that truth matters, then they watch deception. They hear sermons about justice, then they watch silence in the face of obvious injustice. And eventually, the mind asks a dangerous question: If this message is true, why does reality look so different? That question has created more skeptics than atheists ever could. One reason questioning feels dangerous in many religious spaces is because questions threatens control. Truth welcomes scrutiny. Control fears it. The moment any system tells you don't think, just believe, something is already wrong. Because genuine faith and honest inquiry are not enemies. In fact, many people didn't lose faith because they doubted. They lost faith because nobody allowed them to doubt honestly. And when curiosity becomes rebellion, thinking becomes dangerous. That is how dependency is manufactured. If this continues, Nigeria may drift towards two extremes. On one side, people who outsource all thinking. On the other, people who reject everything spiritual. And both outcomes are tragic, because somewhere in the middle is the faith we desperately need, a faith that welcomes questions, a faith that values truth over personalities, a faith that builds character before chasing miracles, a faith that strengthens conscience instead of creating dependency, a faith that teaches people how to think, not just how to live. So perhaps the most important question is not, are Nigerians losing God? Maybe the real question is this: what if God is escaping bad theology? What if the crisis we are witnessing is not the death of faith, but the exposure of counterfeit faith? What if revival doesn't arrive through louder prayers, bigger conferences, more religious branding? What if revival looks like clarity, honesty, courage, responsibility, and a generation willing to choose truth over comfort? Because the future of Christianity in Nigeria will not be decided by how many people fill church buildings. It will be decided by how many people are willing to pursue truth, even when truth becomes uncomfortable.